healing, man! I need some healing! Come on, man!
I'm doing it, dude!
Doing what? Hey, what the fuck are you doing?
I'm Fistweaving, man! All the cool monks are doing it.
What about the goddamn healing?
This is the healing, dude. What are you talking about?
Man, have you even studied talents, gear, covenants, rotations, legendaries and shit? Yeah, I thought so. Now go do some fucking homework and come back with some actual heals.
Gee. Marcelian is right. I need more homework. And you need to subscribe. No, really, if you do subscribe and enable those notifications, it will really help the video out and our channel as well. By just, subscribing and enabling those notifications, you first make the video be more cool in the eyes of the YouTube gods and just pump it to more people, which obviously is great for us. But by enabling those notifications, you also get to see all of our other types of content because we do class podcasts with really cool people from the theory crafting community and also the tier lists, which are just simple, stupid fun. We really appreciate all the support, and with just those 2 clicks, you'll be closer to our hearts. And now, starting with the first row, because that's how mom taught me, Mist Wrap is one of the best choices you can make for Mythic Plus scenarios in which you will be casting any number of enveloping mists, which with the playstyles we will recommend, you will. The duration being increased by 1 second is already good enough for a very strong heal over time effect, and the 10% healing increase essentially makes the mana you spend on enveloping mists a lot more efficient. This works even better with the Rising Mist talent that will work towards extending the hot, which now will have a higher cap to which it can be extended. Overall, this talent is ideal for small group content. If you are strictly aiming to raid, Chi Burst is a better alternative. Since raiding scenarios see people stacked more often than not, Chi Burst gains more value overall, not to mention it costs 0 mana, so yeah. You want to fire this as often as you can, hitting as many people as you can. Other than that, there's no real depth to it outside of how the game actually calculates its healing, but that's just a bit too much for this guide. Moving on to the mobility row, pick whatever you want. Not really, each option has its usage, and each option brings with it a different mobility profile that you either want or need. Tiger's Lust is what we will recommend for all of the content though. It adds a burst of speed to you or an ally, and what's more important, removes roots and the like. And if you have played any amount of Shadowlands dungeons, you will know there are some slows and roots and shit like that that doesn't let you play the game, basically. Yeah. The third row is aimed at providing you with mana management tools since, well, Mistweaver burns through mana faster than most healers. Mana Tea is the overall best talent for all scenarios, raids and dungeons alike, regardless of the build you are running. Now that you have a new cooldown to play with, Yulon or Chi if you talent into it, Mana Tea will work really well with that. The reason being is that during your celestial cooldown you want to cast as many enveloping mists as possible, and the hots are very expensive. Expensive as flying fuck. The other options are not bad, and if you will be casting enveloping mists a fair bit, take life cycles. Crane is fundamentally worse, and even though all of these help with mana, we really recommend Mana Tea. There is actually a spreadsheet in the Peak of Serenity community that maths out the argument you will find about Crane versus Mana Tea. The idea is that you will need a lot of fully stacked Blackout kicks with the teachings of the monastery just to compete with a few casts of Vivify. So unfortunately, however much I personally want Crane to be better, it's not. Next row is simple as well. Yep, pretty fucking simple. Can you spell Ring of Peace? Hell yeah! It's arguably the best crowd control spell in the entire game. It might not have too many uses in raids, cause not a lot of CC usually matters in raids, and I said not a lot and not any CC. Some CC is still important. but dungeons is where you will mostly put this to good use. Impassable terrain with a displacement mechanic is invaluable no matter what group you have and what key you do. Song of Chi-Ji is not going to see much play in PvE, and Leg Sweep is hardly useful in a meta of DPSers and tanks with AoE stuns by just having its cooldown reduced. Leg Sweep by itself is still good. Use Leg Sweep. Please stun. Please, for the love of God, stun. And we reach the defensive row. There are two options we would like to recommend. The Fuse Magic is your magic damage reduction that helps you either survive heavy magic hits or remove heavy magic debuffs. Something like heavy. This is usually in raids, but happens in dungeons as well. It depends what mechanics you want to be able to handle. In raids you will hardly take physical damage, so the Fuse will be good there, while Mythic Plus dungeons will have a mix of damage. The Prideful Affix, Poison, and magic debuffs, curses, and all of this stuff will be dealt with pretty well by using the Fuse. Dampen Harm, however, is a more universal choice and helps with bigger hits of damage, regardless of what type it is, although you will use it most likely for physical damage since magical is still better dealt with the Fuse. Dampen is especially good when there's like one big hit you want to protect against, which is a rare enough scenario on its own. Plus, the cooldown is larger on Dampen, so you want to factor that in as well. And now we are getting into the meat of things. Summon Jade Serpent Statue is a simple option for dungeons. This is an easy to manage ability that costs little mana for what it needs to do. Ideally, you will use it to channel Soothing Mist on your tank or a person soaking a mechanic, having a debuff you can't or won't dispel, essentially anyone that needs a lot of spot healing. It channels for 8 seconds and you only really need to activate it by just tapping your Soothing Mist once. The 8 seconds are hasted, which means the channel will be shorter the more haste you have. You don't need to keep channeling your own Soothing Mist for the duration. Positioning and reapplying is important, so keep that in mind. For raiding, you want to go with Refreshing Jade Wind. This is essentially more healing per global when people are stacked, and this is more likely to happen in raids. Not to mention that running this in dungeons already loses you a sixth of its value because of the number of people, and another sixth for every person that is not stacked on you. So no bueno in dungeons. Invoke Chi-Ji, the Red Crane, replaces your Yulon with the Crane Celestial, and if we're talking efficiency, it's way better in dungeons than the statue. The idea is still to cast as many enveloping mists as you can to trigger the Celestial's enveloping breath, which is conveniently not showcased on its tooltip, whether you talent into Crane or not. With Crane, however, you can actually start DPSing and have a free enveloping mist after every 3 globals spent on kicks, Blackouts, Rising Sun, and Spinning Crane kicks to be precise. If you have Blackout kicks stacked by the passive for more kicks per cast, each one gives you a stack of, enveloping breath thingy that makes enveloping mists instant. Each of these will also trigger your mastery each time on 2 targets, so essentially you want Chi-Ji for Fistweaving builds. And speaking of which, Rising Mist, baby! Hell yeah! Making a return into the gameplay. Rising Mist sits at the top in terms of raw HPS output if played correctly, which of course is an argument for any talent options. Whether you are in dungeons or raids, you want to pair this up with Chi-Ji for the synergy and really just healing output. Like I said, this is the best option if you play it right. It's not easy to be in melee and kick and punch away, and the more you are forced to not be on your target and smash their faces, the more this talent loses value. The heal from Rising Sun Kick will only trigger once per person per kick, regardless of how many of the HOTS they have, but the duration is triggered on all of the HOTS on all of the people. For a more forgiving playstyle in raids, you can go with Upwelling. This makes your Essence Font store 1 more bolt every second it spends off cooldown for a total of 18 extra bolts. Be that as it may, ideally you will use Font anytime 6 or more people are hurt, so the stacks is a bonus, not a goal. The healing itself is very efficient and really only valuable in raids since Font is already an ideal spell to use for AoE healing whenever possible. The purpose of it is to spread that HOT so that more targets can benefit from your mastery that will trigger twice on targets that have Essence Font on them. What this means is that if you would heal someone and your mastery will proc, that person will have an extra tick of healing. If that person also has Essence Font on them, that tick happens twice. Essence Font itself doesn't trigger your mastery, but makes it so the spells that do will trigger it twice. As for the dungeon's alternative to Rising Mist, Focus Thunder is once again your go-to. It will make your Thunder Focus Tea buff 2 spells instead of 1. This makes Thunder Focus Tea a spell you want to use on cooldown as much as possible. Even better, gives you the flexibility of hot uptime, mana management, DPS increase, emergency heals, all of this to a higher degree. If you take this, then you really want to use the Thunder Focus Tea on cooldown. The biggest benefit of this in keys is that you can pop Thunder Focus Tea around 18 seconds before a big AoE phase and use it for 2 renewing mists, making the time when the damage hits meet your group with 3 total rems out, and you being able to heal the entire party with each Vivify cast. It's not very straightforward to figure out what stats are the best for Mistweaver, or any healer for that matter. You can go to questionablyepic.com/live and use the tool there to figure out what gear is best to equip. Although the tool does not generate stat weights, something WoWanalyzer.com does with a log from you, it can still point you right or give you a good sense of what is better to equip. That is on paper, because your playstyle matters. Your rotation, as in you using your spells correctly, matters. But hey, we are nothing if not informative. There are a couple of stat priorities you want to look at depending on the build you run or the content you do. For any of the builds, intellect will sit at the top. As such, eye level will always be your first deciding factor when comparing 2 items, with the exception of rings, necks, and trinkets, where stats and procs matter a bit more, and the formers don't even have intellect on them to begin with. Higher eye level means more intellect for all the other items, which means more throughput. For now anyway, but likely won't change too soon either. If your primary focus is doing mythic keys with the normal healing build, aka the Focus Thunder playstyle, you want Mastery at the top with the other 3 pretty close to each other right after. And of course, if you are a Chad, you will fist your way up the keys, so you will want Haste at the top, on actually equal grounds with Versatility and Crit. A quick disclaimer, even if you Fistweave, you will have moments when you will take a step back and spam Vivifies, Enveloping Mists and such. If you Fistweave for your healing, you actually want a faster playstyle. First, because of using Rising Sun Kick, which has its cooldown reduced by haste, you increase the uptime of your HOTS on your group, meaning when you do Vivify, you will cleave a lot more healing. More than that, most of the melee abilities you will be spamming do not cost any mana. Looking at you, Tiger Palm and Blackout Kick. And this is important because Blackout Kicks have a chance to reset the cooldown of Rising Sun Kick, and Tiger Palming a target adds a stack of your passive Teachings of the Monastery, which will make you kick an extra time the next time you use Blackout Kick. And this can stack up to 3 times, giving you a 4 total kicks into 1 Blackout Kick cast, potentially. And although the chance to reset doesn't add up to 60% that like you might think, it will individually give each kick a 15% chance to reset Rising Sun Kick. Man, so many fucking kicks, man! This essentially makes your Rising Sun Kick have immense value in its small healing from Rising Mist, but also for every 4 seconds of every hot it extends. All of these are made even stronger by the Fistweaving Legendary, which we will discuss soon. Mastery sits sad at the bottom and only starts to hit diminishing returns at around 159.6%, because I know a lot of people are interested in this information for whatever reason. Since you will be using a lot more kicks and palms that don't contribute to gusts of mists, its overall value will still drop. If you are healing with the Upwelling talent, obviously in raids, you want to go for crit and versatility above all else. This is about making your globals strong and efficient when it comes to time and mana. Simple as that. Mastery will be lower with haste at the bottom for the same reason as before. A heavy haste focused playstyle will deplete your mana quicker. First, because you would be casting spells faster, and these spells will also be individually weaker since you won't be pumping crits as often or have their raw throughput increased with versatility. And with Rising Mist, the priority remains similar, with the only exception being Mastery falling through the floor again for the same reason I mentioned just a minute ago. In raids, the fights last longer, and outside a potion or a lucky healer cooldown that can help you with mana, if you have a druid or a priest or a resto shaman in a raid, you won't have a lot of ways to manage your mana, so your heals by themselves have to be stronger, aka crit and verse will follow intellect in strength. This is all informational, mostly to give you a sense of what to aim for. There are always intricacies to specs we leave out of our videos, so we don't turn guides into podcasts. intricacies such as Leech being one of the strongest stats for healers, especially ones that do damage, due to the sheer value of it healing you when you DPS and when you heal target. Oftentimes, Leech can be just as good as Intellect, but that is situational and based on your playstyle. Following all of this, the consumables we will recommend are more in line with the stat priority, but feel free to test out different ones and see what works better for you. Your weapon should still ideally have Celestial Guidance for the pretty often Intellect procs. For the chest, Eternal Stats is a safe bet, and you can also add a heavy Desolate armor kit for the extra stamina, which helps out during tough content. Eternal Intellect for your bracers and Fortified Leech for your cloak will end it up. Leech because, well, we mentioned how good the stat is. And if you still don't get it, think about this. The last person you want to worry about healing is you. Because Intellect is so strong, Leviathan's Eye of Intellect are still gems worth putting into one of your sockets. You can only have one of them though. BFA or not BFA, it's still good. Deadly Jewel Cluster can be a good overall choice if you don't want to worry about what content you do, but if you do focus more on mythic dungeons, just go with quick jewel clusters instead. Same crit versus haste argument for the rings. Tenet of Critical Strike or Tenet of Haste will be your options based on what you want to accomplish. For the alchemy side, it's a little simpler. Potion of Spectral Intellect is your I want to do more healing and damage option. Yes, damage. Also, since your kicks and palms and shit scale with your spell power. And as a healer, never forget to have a Potion of Sacrificial Anima for those raid bosses where you run out of mana too soon. We know those moments. The potion is actually really good for Mistweaver if you use the stacks on Enveloping Mist, Essence Font, Celestial, and so on, the expensive spells. And that will end up saving you a lot more mana. The flask is clearly the Spectral Flask of Power, and to close it off, use the Embalmer's Oil on your weapon for some self-sustain. Although the heal is so small that if you are comfortable with Fistweaving, Shadowcore Oil will be better since damage is always preferred. Eat a feast! No really, feasts are the best food if you can afford them since, well, intellect. Otherwise, Spine Fin Souffle and Fries for the crit or Tenebrous Crown Roast aspect for the haste will be your cheaper alternatives. Covenants are fairly close, and there are currently 2 that outperform the rest, even if only by a little. If your main focus is raiding, go with Necrolords and take Emony as your Soulbind. If this is your first visit to the Bony Boys, Emony is good because of lead by example more than anything. The amazing 12% extra intellect every time you pop the Covenant ability is crazy good. And yeah, you give 2% main stat to up to 4 allies as well. The ideal way to build Emony is to take the 2 potency route since really lead by example is what you want. Bone Dust Brew is exceptional at healing tight groups of people, again raid scenarios, and has a chance to duplicate healing spells cast while also buffing your mastery effect on targets hit. It also duplicates the damage instances, but realistically you will still want it for the HPS throughput. For dungeons, Kyrian is much better with Clea as the ideal soulbind. Valiant Strikes and Pointed Courage work really well with Critical Strike as a stat. It can actually make it a really good raid option as well. Weapons of Order adds a buttload of mastery, and to top it off, makes Essence Font reset and insta-heal at start and end of the channel, which is okay, I guess. Outside of that, the raw amount of mastery can be a really good buff into making your Vivify cleaves heal for a lot more, and really buffing Chi-Ji, which scales with mastery. A good combo to use is Weapons of Order into Essence Font into Chi-Ji and continue onward. The way you use it is up to you though, but feels like you can also pop it before you go into a heavy Vivify spam with a lot of renewing mists out. The gusts are so strong that at my shitty eye level, a gust heals for more than a Vivify when you buff it with Weapons of Order. Like, what even is life anymore? As for the conduits themselves, Jade Bond is likely the one you will use the most. This will reduce the cooldown of your Celestial every time you use an ability that triggers your mastery. I mean, it is very good, but it also matters if you end up using the cooldown reduction, aka popping your Celestial on cooldown. This can be tricky since the spell is very strong and you don't really want to just pop it for one person. You might end up holding it for a while, meaning you would make this conduit entirely useless. For those scenarios, going with Bone Marrow Hops if you are Necrolords or Resplendent Mist for Kyrians will be better. The Covenant ability Conduit is pretty self-explanatory, while the Resplendent Mist might only bring you more value outside Fistweaving builds that don't value mastery a lot. As such, Rising Sun Revival works with you casting as many Rising Sun kicks as possible for the cooldown reduction of yet another really good healing spell. For endurance options, Grounding Breath and Fortifying Ingredients are good options to look towards, while Finesse opens up Dizzying Tumble and Swift Transference as some of the better ones. Similar to enchants and stats, trinkets can be simmed and tested. Questionably, Epic Life does a pretty good job at giving you an idea what offers you the most throughput. Unbound Changeling is maybe the best one you can go for, especially if you like to play around with builds, since its bonus can be changed based on the food you last ate. Sinful Gladiator's Insignia of Alacrity works really well with Fistweaving. Passive haste effect with an intellect proc is really easy to manage for a consistent uptime and works better if you run Emony from the Necrolords that indirectly increases the buff as well. Kabbalist Hymnal and Soul-Letting Ruby are very good crit trinkets that might be a bit harder to get, especially the Hymnal, since the Nathrys is the last boss of the raid. But hey, it will be worth it. And we have reached the legendary section. Boy oh boy. Seriously, just go with Ancient Teachings of the Monastery. I mean, come on. Fistweaving is the shit. Alright, I will relax, I promise. But this is the mathematical best legendary, at least based on the sims and theory crafting that the wonderful Peak of Serenity community has done for you. Since by design Fistweaving is an efficient healing playstyle, this just puts more value into it. But hey, I get it, not everyone is into fisting. Can we seriously say this much? Free speech, please? Tear of Mourning is another really good option. The spread mechanic is unreliable and not really why you want it, but it's good when it happens. The increase in Vivify heal on targets with Rem on, and the cleave of Enveloping Mist also on targets with Renewing Mist on, which you will cast a lot during your Celestial, are really fucking good, and essentially plays around your AoE healing playstyle, both good in raids and dungeons. Invoker's Delight is a general monk legendary, also really good for Windwalker, just FYI. It is a super haste buffer, being awesome for all reasons we said haste is good for so far in the video, and at the same time with how hot scale with haste, making this essentially a 20% buff to the healing of Enveloping Mist and breaths from your Celestial. That aside, a lot of people use it for upwelling builds in raids as well, making Essence Font channels faster and giving your Celestial window actually enough time to get a few more Enveloping Mists out, thanks to all that reduced cast time from the haste, plus the pot being stronger again. All in all, the choice should be made based on your preference. In raids, if you are playing the Upwelling build with the Jade, Wind, and Chi Burst talents, you want your priority to be as follows. If you are the only monk in the raid, make sure you tag the target or the boss at least with your Mystic Touch debuff. You can place it with Crackling Jade Lightning or any melee damage ability. Keep Renewing Mist active on target so you can AoE heal through your Vivify cleaves. Use Chi Burst on cooldown on as many targets as you can, like mentioned earlier. You can also precast this if you know the damage hits within 1 or 2 seconds, so the heal just procs right after the damage hits. Just little things. Pop Thunder Focus Tea on cooldown and use it on what you need. Vivify if you want to manage your mana, Rising Sun Kick if nobody needs healing, or Renewing Mist so you can keep more and more hots up, especially if you predict an incoming raid-wide damage phase in around 20 seconds-ish. Use Vivify on targets that need healing. Simple, efficient. After the buffs to Soothing Mist, it's actually worth channeling Soothing Mist into Enveloping Mists on targets that need heavier healing. Maybe they have a lot of bleed stacks or are taking large amounts of damage, you know. You can and should ideally continue with Vivify spams through the channel based on how much healing you need to put out. Although Enveloping Mist is worth baking into the Soothing Mist channel due to their value return on the GCD price they take, Vivify is worth to hard cast if you are not casting more than 2 on the same target. If the group you are in, stacked, takes damage, keep refreshing Jade Wind up. Pop Essence Font when the raid or 6 or more people are taking any amount of damage, regardless of the upwelling stacks. It's also good to cast if people need healing and you need to move. Use Mana Tea for each instance of Yulon pressed, since you will be spamming Enveloping Mists on target. If your goal is to cover as much as a raid in the hot, then hard casting might be preferred over instantly cast through Soothing Mist. Otherwise, you will use Mana Tea for each period of intense healing that you need to do, so long as you will have it available for the next time you need to invoke your Celestial. Hit as many players with Bone Dust Brew as much as possible, and use Revival whenever the raid needs a lot of instant healing and dispels, cause it dispels stuff. Otherwise, channeling Soothing Mist on the tank can be a good use of your mana if big healing isn't required. When Fistweaving with Rising Mist in raids, the priority is more or less the same, but you will want to keep Sun Kick on cooldown right after making sure people have Renewing Mists on them. Ideally, this can also be a bigger priority to be buffed by your Thunder Focused Tea as well. Keep in mind that if people don't need healing, you can DPS reduce the cooldown of Sun Kick by using Black Owl Kick and Tiger Palm to buff the former and increase the chance of a Rising Kick reset. Also, if you Fistweave, you will want to not cast Soothing Mist or hard cast Enveloping Mist almost at all, with the exception of your Celestial window, of course. In dungeons, when running the Focused Thunder playstyle, the most important thing to keep in mind is Renewing Mist needs to be up on as many people as possible, since you will be using Vivify to actually heal either the damaged target or as many people as you can through its AoE heal effect. Soothing Mist into Enveloping Mist when one target, the tank maybe, is taking heavy damage. Essence Font is only good when you want its double mastery proc or you are on the move and people need or will need healing after. Make sure Mystic Touch is applied to the pack. Easiest way to put it on is to use Spinning Crane Kick. Make sure you reposition and trigger the channel of your Jade Serpent statue. Lastly, using Thunder Focus Tea on Renewing Mist will be your most important combo, just like we mentioned before in the talent section. This will increase the uptime on the hot and by extension will get you more targets to be affected in the long run. Similarly to the raid, when using Rising Mist in dungeons, you want to keep Rising Sun Kick on cooldown, and when you use Thunder Focus Tea, combine the two for more damage, healing, and duration increase on hots. In any of the two scenarios, if you are using the ancient teachings of the Monastery Legendary, you want to make sure you Essence Font into Sun Kick every time if you will be DPSing for any amount of time. Make sure you always do it with the Legendary buff, aka after you have just used Essence Font. We'd like to give a big shout out to the Peak of Serenity community, the website and the Discord for some amazing information that you guys can and should check, especially if you have any more in-depth and nuanced questions about Mistweaver, because the big boys there and gals do an amazing job at keeping people informed. It's actually really pretty fucking cool. Questionably Epic is also a really good source to check all healer information. And a special thank you to Abelito and Anomaly for giving us their feedback on our guide. They actually explained a lot of things that are not very straightforward, because it just turns out Mistweaver just doesn't function as the tooltips imply, or at least they lead you to believe. They are amazing theory crafters and people who know a lot more about the spec than we do, and we definitely suggest you check them out. You can also find Anomaly on twitch.tv/Anomaly when he usually streams progress rating. And also Abelito is the author of the spreadsheet that we mentioned earlier today, which you can also find in the description as well, with all of the links regarding these wonderful people and what we mentioned before. And of course, a special thank you to the Patreons who support our channel. Listen guys, we love you. I know we say this in every video, and it's not because we think it's mandatory, but it's just the most that we can do to show our appreciation. It really helps us out if you support us, and if you, dear viewer, also want to support us a little bit more, the Patreon link is down below in the description alongside everything else we've mentioned. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.